Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome this evening. My name is Councillor Stanley Forecast. I'm the chairman of this committee, Communities, Leisure and Arts. It's the first time I've been chairman, so you might have to bear with me, all of you and officers. This meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the council's YouTube channel. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? I ask this so that people at the meeting will know if this will be happening. Yeah, no. Is that better? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Will anyone be recording this evening? No? And then let me just let you know, if the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated and members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give instructions if we need to evacuate. So item 1, apologies. Apologies have been received from Councillor Bryant. Item 2, substitute members. Can any substitutes present please state their attendance? Michelle Hasty for Councillor Bryant. Item 3, urgent items. I intend to take the minutes of the meeting held on 23rd of May and the forward plan relating to the committee's terms of reference as urgent items. They have been made available through the amended agenda published on the 5th of June to enable the committee to consider them before the next meeting. No? Is that, yeah? Yeah, do people want that repeated? What I just said, or we're all okay? Cool. Change to the order of business. I intend to take item 9, minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of May, and item 10, the forward plan relating to the committee's term of reference, before item 8, which is the fourth quarter financial update and performance monitoring. Item 4, notification of visiting members. There are none, unfortunately. Item 5, disclosures. Are there any disclosures by members or officers? No? Any disclosures of lobbying? Anyone? No? All okay? Right. Item 7, I move that all items be taken into public. Is this agreed? And item 9. Is there any comments to make on the accuracy of the minutes, anyone? Have we all seen them? Cool, so the minutes agreed? Agreed, brilliant, thank you. Item 10, the forward plan. Does anyone have any comments to make on the forward plan? Councillor Harper.
Sorry about that. Yeah, the forward plan just struck me as rather thin since we're at the beginning of the year. And I was wondering, given some of the discussions we had, if you like, in the previous year, there's a couple of elements of work which I would have thought would come back to us in some discussion, in sort of format. And I was thinking of some of the work we agreed, if you like, the interim works on the leisure centre, when we decided, I can't remember, to spend about £500,000, a couple of £100,000 doing the cafe area, wasn't it, from memory? Quite where that's got to. Obviously the Archbishop's Palace. Now, I'm not sure quite, how it sort of falls between us and corporate services, but obviously the proposal for it to be turned into the boutique hotel has fallen by the by, and the council's having to make use of it whilst it's working out what else to do with it. So I didn't know whether that would be something for this committee or corporate services or wherever, but it needs to feature somewhere if we're going to not end up with a couple of £100,000 a year maintenance. And then the other couple of things, looking at what we're responsible for, one was grants. We've got a grants budget here, and I think that's mainly the Citizens Advice Bureau, but quite what the policy is relating to that, I think could be quite useful. And my final one, which I'm concerned at, and I know that Claudine knows because I've discussed this with her, is around the Maidstone museums and their accreditation with the Arts Council as a registered museum, bearing in mind current reorganisation plans going on at the museum. There are concerns that that may impact on our ability to remain an accredited museum. So those were just sort of four areas I thought we might want, or you might, Claudine, want to think about in terms of the agendas coming forward.
Thank you. If I can take them all, okay, yep. If I can take them all one by one. So the interim works on the leisure centre. You'll probably remember, those of you that sat on this committee before, you've made that decision last year. So we're very much obviously discouraged in having reports just for noting. So the decision you made as the committee last year to go ahead with those interim works, so that is planned into the capital programme. So when we start doing the work on the budget, you'll see that in there. So I would probably disagree that there's anything more decision-wise to come on that would need to be in this forward plan. The Archbishop's Palace, there is some work being done on that, and if I could just double check that is come to this committee with Finance Director in a minute, but first of all, if I could go to number 3, which is the grants, they will be coming here because that is what's happened. The communities from the old Community Housing and Environment Committee is obviously coming here. So any decision making that was done with those by Councillor Parfitt-Reid under that committee will fall to this. So that will naturally get programmed in, but I just don't think it goes that far ahead yet, because from memory, I think they're towards the end of the year. And then finally, the Maidstone Museum point that you raise is very much a staffing issue. It's not a member decision. So I will take that away to think about, but I can't see how that will fall into a future decision for this for this committee at this time. The one thing you will notice, obviously, the reason why it's looking a little light at the moment is because the old committee was Economic Regeneration and Leisure, and the E and the R has been carved out and has gone to the new PIDE committee, Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development. So what you'll see featured throughout this committee's forward plan is obviously a lot more of the communities items will come through. And the things like the financial inclusion strategy will come through as well for your decision. I think that's probably all I want to say on that now, but I will just check with Finance Director, if I could, about that point about the Archbishop's Palace.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, as the Cabinet Member has said, there is work underway in relation to the Archbishop's Palace. There are elements both of property and of leisure and arts in relation to this. So I think it's still to be decided whether it comes to this committee or to the Corporate Services Committee, but it's certainly something that will be coming forward to one of the PACs and then ultimately to the Executive for a decision in the next few months.
Yeah, of course.
Just come back. The museum, whilst I understand, obviously, the staffing reorganisation is currently in hand, I think the issue of concern is about the museum's accreditation status. And is there any chance that the reorganisation may impinge on our ability for the museum to be an accredited museum? Because if it were to lose that status, it wouldn't be recognised by the Arts Council as a museum, and the funding we receive as an accredited museum to fund our education programme would also be withdrawn. We receive that because we're currently an accredited museum. So I think it's just, we need to make sure that whether it in what format that's reviewed, that element is kept under review, because if we were to lose accreditation, then, as I say, effectively the museum would be considered as a heritage centre and not an official museum funded and under the auspices of the Arts Council of England.
I mean, all I probably would say is I think it's quite clear that this committee and the council have shown a commitment to the museum. I mean, £400,000 towards the new gallery is a significant financial contribution from the council towards revitalising the museum, making it a star attraction of the town, and hoping, that it's going to fit in with our town centre strategy, and making it one of the, I would like to see it as one of the kind of linchpins of what's going on. There's always stuff going on there. If the gallery gets, we get that finished, the excitement building around that, and we're obviously going to look to go through. So I suppose all I would say to the committee is just keep on valuing the museum, and if there's decisions that come about it, I'd encourage you all to just be positive about it and try and, make sure that it is one of the main features of our town centre, because it is now, but it really should be going forward. And I think we're well aware of the accreditation that you talk about, and there's no plans to let that slip.
Yeah, sorry, I've championed this museum for years and years and years, and don't get me wrong, I'm still championing. My real concern is, as you know, Claudine, is around accreditation, because that's fundamental in terms of the status of the museum as it's seen across the country. And we've got to make sure that for the sake of a couple of £1,000 or a post here or there, that we don't lose that, because the ability of the museum to fight above it to punch at a higher level in it as it does now with national museums would be lost. So that's just keeping that focus on that element of it. But yes, the gallery, I've been involved from MMF, fundraising the money, as you know. So I mean, we've done an incredible job with the council and MMF and everybody concerned to get that money, and we're hoping to get the ramp, the flexi step in and other stuff. So it remains really important, which is why I'm concerned, as I say. Accreditation may sound rather dry, but it is quite fundamental in terms of the sector the museum works in.
I mean, I suppose all I'd say is I don't see how it would be lost. And bringing us back to the forward plan, I'm not sure that I see anything that would warrant a report coming on it, which is, what we're considering now.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Are there any further comments to make on the Councillor Gooch?
Thank you, Chairman. It was more of a comment, really, about the Archbishop's Palace, Councillor Russell. It is a bit of a hot potato in all sorts of ways, but I'm a bit concerned about the crossover between the two committees, and I would strongly encourage the consideration of having a joint PAC. I don't want there to be strict lines drawn between the committees, because it's slightly, the whole subject could well fall between two stools if we're not careful. And I'm sure that, and I'm not being sarcastic, I'm sure that the Cabinet works together, therefore the policy advisory committees could work together if it's necessary. It has happened to have a joint committee on a couple of occasions here in this chamber, so it won't be anything new, or well, it might be horrifying for the clerks, but we have done it before, so I would urge you please to bear that in mind. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy for a giant PAC, but equally I think we did have some reports last year that the same report went through a number of PACs to actually get the different steers on them from the different PACs. So I wonder that it might go that way, which is also fine. As long as we get all of the input, that's perfect.
Brilliant, thank you. Are there any further comments? Councillor Nagy.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, a few things actually. I've never seen advisory in a committee title before. That seems so flimsy. Obviously, there's a lot of work gone into these titles, and obviously, as usual, no one's thought about who's responsible for anything, and would take about 6 months to figure out who's what. So it seems to me that we won't be doing anything with the Archbishop Palace. That's gone somewhere else. Leisure Centre's gone somewhere else, and all those sort of things that we usually did cover. I would just like to see what we're actually going to be doing and what are we responsible for, rather than as soon as there's a change of title, which I've seen before, and then we spend 2 or 3 meetings figuring out who's responsible for what, all that crosses over. I would just like to see a bit of thought go in it before we start doing this, because advisory means we'll just be sitting here advising. To me, I don't know what the other members think, but I would just like to know, are we going to carry on doing anything that from the previous, or is this a complete fresh start? But to see advisory there, I don't really know what's that doing in the title of a committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aggie. I probably would just say a bit of bedtime reading, the Constitution. So we changed to the new Constitution last year. Ever since we changed the new Constitution, the committees have been policy advisory committees. So they're here so that you discuss the items that are coming up, you provide your advice, and then all of those items either go to an individual cabinet member for an individual cabinet member decision, or they go to the old executive committee, which is now going to be called the Cabinet Committee, where we make the Cabinet decision. And obviously you can come then again. I didn't see very many members last year at all, actually, other than I did see Councillor Harper, and I think I saw Councillor Gooch once. But, you know, I didn't see anyone else come to the executive last year, but you're more than welcome to come to the Cabinet, where we sign off and make the actual decision to influence our thinking again then. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Do you want to come back?
Yeah, I just brought that up because obviously there's a bit of doubt about who's covering what on the old palace, which is a very important thing. And it's a bit sad that Hush Heath didn't take that over, actually. So it's another grey area, but there we go. It is one of our biggest assets, and it's a bit surprising that it crosses over 2 committees. Thank you.
Councillor Hasty.
Thank you. David, all of the responsibilities for each PAC were all listed out in the paperwork that we got given at the AGM as well, and where things were moving to. And it's been a policy advisory committee for over a year as well. And all the information is there, broken down into which cabinet member has responsibility for what, and which committees go on to what and what their remit is. So we have been told it's not being kept in the dark or out of the loop. It's all there.
Councillor Russell.
I think also what I'd just say is that nothing's lost. It's all just been rejigged. So the work that comes on the normal forward plans that hit key dates in the year so that we get the budget, we get strategic decisions made in a timely fashion, that is all as is. It's just been redistributed. I think when it was looked at and when the portfolios were looked at, there was a discussion about whether to have 3 policy advisory committees or 4. But the recommendation cross-party, the thought was to go with 4. So that's why we've got Communities, Leisure and Arts, which obviously just fits with me, so you'll just be seeing me the whole time as your cabinet member, but and it is probably one of the lighter forward plans. So I mean, this is all things to inform our thinking for future years, but for this year we're running it as it is, and I have no doubt other things will come up that will get added to the forward plan because we're just at the start of the year. But equally, what they're not flooded with is lots of reports for noting. They are for decision making and for you to help us inform our decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Any further comments? Councillor Gooch.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry to be a pain, and I could be totally off key asking this question. It has suddenly occurred to me, the Communications and Engagement Strategy Action Plan. I don't suppose by any chance that includes the parish charter, does it? And pardon my ignorance, I know I should know. I have a reason for asking.
Brand new to this part of my portfolio, so I probably would double check with our Director for Governance, Insight and Communities. I think I've got that wrong, but you know, Angela Woodhouse. But I think yes, the parish charter is coming. I think it's its own separate thing. It is not built into this communication engagement strategy action plan. That's its separate thing. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Any further comments on the forward plan? No, I can't see one, so I move that the forward plan to be noted. Is that agreed? Agreed. Brilliant. Thank you, members. So that takes us to item 8, the fourth quarter financial update, to be introduced by Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chairman. So we've got before us the fourth quarter financial update and performance monitoring report. You can see that we've got the KPIs as well. We've got performance monitoring. We've got some information about the recovery and renewal update and the UK Share Prosperity Fund update as well. So you can see what the money's been being spent on. A lot of it is for noting, but there are some decisions for you which relate to the KPIs for this committee going forward, because as we've talked previously, the old Economic Regeneration and Leisure Committee is at an end, so their KPIs will not now be relevant to our Community Leisure and Arts. So you will see on page, let me just refresh my memory, the appendix. Oh, it's gone. You'll see on, go on, Councillor Harper, what was it? Oh, thanks. On page 18, you'll see that we've got some new key performance indicators which have been put forward by the heads of service for each of these items that they think will be appropriate for monitoring the things to do with this committee going forward. So I'd like to take your advice on that. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Councillor Russell. And I believe we have Carly online just to go through the KPIs and give more insight to them. Brilliant. Thank you, Carly. So yeah, I open the floor to debate. Members, any comments to make or recommendations? Yeah, Councillor Fort.
Looking at the finances, the market once again seems to be not making very much money. And I know since I've been on the council, and that's 8 years, it's been in the same sort of predicament. I wonder if we should have a closer look at it and put it on a KPI.
So is that an amendment that you're putting forward, that we have a KPI for the market? And
Yeah.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hinder? Do you want to speak?
Yeah, I totally agree with Councillor Ford. I've been on here a long time, and the market has been one of those items where it never seem to make money. It's causing problems because of lack of attendance, etc., etc. But again, I disagree. It's not on the KPIs, and I think that it really is time that we took a much closer look at the market and try and elicit some extra information for us as councillors as to what is the problems and what steps could possibly be taken to remedy the situation.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Councillor Hinder. Councillor Harper?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The explanation, isn't it, for the market is partly on page 14, but we've been having that explanation almost on a quarterly basis for, I'm thinking, about 5 years now. And every year when we come to budget making, and Bob and Jill will remember, and Faye, is that we've reduced the income target more or less every year in a hope to address the issues at the market. But even though we've been doing that year on year on year, we're still underachieving. And if we look at the figures this year, we approved a budget for the market, which is twice a week, only to make a surplus of £24,000, yet it's come in making a loss of £41,000. Whilst that, okay, £65,000 may not sound that large, if we were to compare to where we projected income probably 5 years ago, we're probably 100,000, 150,000 quid less than what we thought. And we have done a lot of work here to try to improve the market. We've had Alexa discuss the issue with us, as I say, on a number of times, and I think we've even invested money in trying to revamp the market. But, you know, the hard facts sort of show that despite all of that, we just seem to be not, you know, the market's just sort of withering on the vine. So I think the idea of having a KPI around it to give us a feel as to, you know, how well it's used on the Tuesday and on the Friday when the markets are held, may start to provide information on which the Policy Advisory Committee may be a sort of to advise a cabinet member at some point on perhaps what the solution is for the Lock Meadow market, you know, because we just can't keep on in the way it's going, I think. So I think I'd fully support the idea of putting in a KPI on that. Another one I wondered was, given that arts has become a big issue, you know, we're doing quite a bit on arts with Anne-Marie, even though it's a relatively small budget. I wonder perhaps in terms of encompassing that vibrancy, we could think about an additional KPI picking up on our arts events, either perhaps the number we do or a number of people engaged with them, just to give us a feel as to, you know, how well we're actually doing on our cultural policies. And it would, you know, because we've got footfall at the museum and so on. So well, that might be perhaps worth picking up. On the finance bit, on going back to page 13 and 14, I was slightly confused on one of the explanations, because on our second line down, it shows the Lock Meadow complex making a loss compared to budget of £84,000. This is excluding the market. But then when I looked at the explanations, it suddenly becomes a positive variance of 48,000. So not only is the figures back to front, but it's a negative has become negative variance has become a positive variance. So I just couldn't quite tally up how that table and the variance explanation worked out. And I just had a couple of other ones, smaller requests for understanding on the variances. So on festivals and events, we had a budget of an income budget of 17,000. We've actually almost doubled it to 30,000. And I'm just thinking, you know, I mean, that's very good news, clearly, as to how was that achieved. I mean, hopefully it's because either some of our commercial activities, you know, generated a lot more income, or they may be new items, but, you know, that's a considerably improved thing on a fairly small budget. And then the leisure centre, where it's a converse, that we approved a budgeted income of 213,000, the actuals down by £27,000. I was just trying to understand why the leisure centre's underperformed financially. It did the same thing the last couple of years, which obviously was linked much more to COVID. So I was wondering whether that the underachievement of income in the year which has just finished is also the residual impacts of COVID and numbers perhaps not back to where we would hope them to be. So that's a couple of things on that bit.
A couple. Okay, I've got some, not all of the answers. The KPI for the market, obviously that motion's on the table to get voted on, and then we'll see where we are with that, and the officers can add one in. I think the reasoning behind what you said was sound. The arts KPI is, I think, included in that one where it says extra visits to the borough for events. So what we're looking at is when we put these things on, how many extra visits do we get when we've got the events on? So, i.e., that will then give you the information. Is it worth us putting the events on? You know, do they bring extra people, or just all of us councillors? No, I'm joking. But so that I think is built into that. But I will just check with Kylie in a second on that one. The Lock Meadow one is easier. The top two lines on the cost centres, landlord costs and complex, then feed back into the positive variance that you see on page 14. So that's that one. Festivals and events. I forgot what you asked me.
It was just that we've done a lot better compared to the budget, and I was just wondering whether that was we've reduced expenditure or we've got extra income perhaps from events being more successful than we had anticipated.
So yay, my team. But no, I'll just ask Carly for some extra information on that maybe as well. I think they have done better than expected. They have been well attended. Certainly, like the Proms in the Park was really well attended. There's Christmas light parade was really well attended. So I think it is a good news story, but I will just get the team to double check that. And I would also like to check about the leisure centre if I could. Carly, over to you. It was about the festivals and events, whether it was a good news story. Oh, Mark might be able to answer that one for me. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Russell. Just on the two financial ones, first of all, festivals and events, exactly as you say, they did well on income and had lower expenditure, so it was a better performance from that unit than budgeted. Leisure centre, as you say, there was a loss of income during COVID because normally we would account for a profit share from the leisure centre, and we had the tail end of that at the beginning of the year, but we're now back to normal trading at the leisure centre, so I'm hoping that that adverse variance will disappear.
Councillor Fort.
Just one question on page 14, the variances. On the Lock Meadow, it seems to be there's a shortfall of rental income. Is it fully tenanted now?
No, it isn't, but there's basically been movement all over. So obviously the people that had the gym facility have gone. That's now being run in conjunction with the council. So it's moving around is what it's doing, but we have got interest in the remaining vacant units, but I don't know what stage so I might pass that over to Mark just to answer that.
Yes, a couple of units have been vacated recently, the former Frankie and Benny's and the Feathers unit, and in both cases we're marketing those actively. We've got interest in both of them, so we're confident that we will be able to get tenants in, but in both cases the leases had just come to an end, and Frankie and Benny's was a business that wasn't trading particularly successfully nationally, so you could understand why they wouldn't take a new lease on. In the case of Feathers, it's owned by Green King, and although that particular unit was trading profitably, we understand, it didn't really fit in with the Green King pub theme, so they didn't have a future for it within their portfolio. But as I say, we're optimistic about finding new tenants for those units.
Anyone else? Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to bring it up, but the more I look at it, the more I do get concerned, or I am concerned about the Moat Park Visitor Centre. It was really a long time coming, and there's been quite an overspend. It's taken a lot longer, and I'm sure I've raised this before, but it makes you wonder if we didn't allow enough in the contingency. and what lessons can be learned for the future. Because I'm thinking that we're looking in the background of what to do with the future of the leisure centre and that kind of thing. And I'm thinking, crikey, if we can be this far out on the visitor centre, what does this tell us about how we manage a much bigger project, such as the leisure centre? And I can't help thinking, especially as we worked so closely with what was a local firm to build it for us, how did it go so, I won't say go so wrong, but that really was a little bit of a, it didn't end up as we'd hoped. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't want to be too negative.
I'm not going to do that thing of this was before I was even here, but I know. I think in all honesty, it was a bit of a perfect storm, I think, that happened. So in the build of that, there were obviously unforeseen things that occurred. I think a lot has to do with, and we need to all be mindful of, when council projects go through planning committee. How do they enter planning committee? How do they come out at the other end? You know, I think we all need to be mindful of that balance between achieving the perfect building and also getting the best value for council money. So I would take that forward to any project that we're going to do next. You know, we can spec it the highest possible spec. There's a cost associated with that. Equally, we don't want to do a bad job of it. No one wants to do that. But I think, you know, these are all the things we must balance in our mind, particularly when it comes down to what the scheme looks like in black and white when it goes to planning committee, because it can come out quite differently. But I would take on board, you know, the thing with construction costs at the moment, they've gone absolutely through the roof. I don't know if anyone's been trying to do any home improvements. I have. It's astronomical, the cost of cement now. So I think that's all played into it as well. But for probably more detail, I will throw back to Mark. Yeah, but I think that, as far as I'm aware of, it was all a bit of a perfect storm with those things.
Yes, I can't add an awful lot to that because the project management wasn't within my area, but I would echo what Councillor Russell said. It was a complex project, because although it's not a massive project, it's a one-off bit of work. So a bespoke design, specialist requirements, lots of issues that were encountered during construction. And as you say, there are lessons to be learned for future projects. I think it's about trying to use standard components, a kind of a more regimented standard system of construction, rather than to try and come up with something which is absolutely perfect, as Councillor Russell says.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, hopefully we will pick up those, because I'm just concerned. We had that discussion about the Moat Park kiosk, and whilst it's relatively small amounts of money, I can remember Claudine, I think we had David Burton there as well, and we had that discussion about if that's going to need planning permission, the fact that basically all we're doing is a relatively simple refurbishment of it, stripping out some of the toilets and putting in some changing rooms from memory and stuff like that. At £50,000, if we're not careful, could suddenly, you know, with a few tweakings at planning, that could be £100,000 or £150,000. So I think it would be worthwhile, the officers and perhaps the cabinet member, making sure, well, not, you can't make sure because obviously planning can do what it likes, but to address the planning committee when the application goes there, because as you say, if they suddenly say they need a higher spec on something, that £50,000 budget goes out the water, and it may end up being something we wouldn't have actually have embarked on. You know, if it comes back to us at say 150,000, and I think the other thing is clearly the leisure provision, which I assume is the part of the interim works to the leisure centre, which was, from memory, isn't it? We're putting in that new wall between the leisure pool and the cafe area in terms of environmental improvements and other stuff. Now, it would be, yeah, hopefully the lessons have been learned, as you said, from the visitor centre, because working in that leisure centre could easily prove much more expensive than than we hoped. And I think the total figure was about 200,000 quid or something. It wasn't a massive amount. And doing, as I say, retrospectively fitting out a chunk of the leisure centre, we just need to make sure that that's going to be on track, or if there are any problems that they're flagged up early so that we can provide the relevant advice. And my last question was, we've then got this other appendices, which is the Recovery and Renewal Action Plan. Now, most of that, as far as I can see, having gone through it, is items which have transferred. It's
not me.
No, it's me, sorry. Sorry, is items which have transferred to us from the old Chi committee, which I don't think any of us were on, or last year. So I just wondered perhaps if the officers could just produce us a short sort of briefing note on, I was looking on the recovery fund, the 30 projects, of which has another phase about to go live, and then the 8 community pride events, and so just so that we actually understand a bit more what these things are, which have moved into our remit. So just a bit of an elaboration in terms of a briefing note probably would be quite useful for all of us, so we understand the new stuff we're dealing with.
Okay. Yes, I suppose with regard to projects, absolutely more than happy to go to planning committee when we have something come up from this committee that we need to get planning for. That is very sensible. I would do that anyway. With regard to budgeting, I think, I can't see costs going down any time soon. So I wouldn't say this is unique to this committee. This is going to be across the board in anything that we do, whether it be part of our, where we're buying the sites and the projects for the 1,000 affordable houses, or whether we're looking at something for leisure and arts. That is going to be across the board. So we need to be very mindful of that. That's the current economic climate that we're in. It would be good if it would end. The briefing note about the recovery and renewal actions, very sensible, and I will get the team to do that, and I'll send that round to the committee so we know where we're going with that. Yeah.
Thank you. Excuse my ignorance, but surely the public, when they go to planning, they're advised to go and get some planning advice first of all. Surely we as a council, with a scheme like the visitor centre and that, must have spoken to the planning department beforehand. Look, this is what we're thinking of doing, this is what we're proposing, what do you think? Which would then get rid of any major problems when it actually goes to planning. I find it a bit ironic that this doesn't appear on occasions to happen.
Oh, therein lies the whole topic, I suppose. All I'd say is, as a council, we obviously have, a responsibility to build correctly for the community. We can't just go in and, build something that's just going to fall down, can we? So within that, lies responsibilities to do it correctly, spec it correctly, all of that. We also have climate change and biodiversity responsibilities. We have to balance and quality materials, and there are some buildings that we're building for the community that we might want to be an exemplar or looking forward, because it's not like we're going to rebuild that every day. So I think there are different considerations that need to be borne in mind when we do these things, but again, I think that needs to all be balanced with cost, and it is a delicate process as it goes through planning committee. So I think there is planning advice that happens. There are also a lot of policies and reputational things that we need to bear in mind when we're building as council, as opposed to a private individual.
Any further comments, Councillor Nargit?
Just an observation, looking at through on page 13, obviously we get performance and development, and then we get press and public relations, and a bit further down there's a communication section, and then there's a policy an information section. Are these, must ask, are these all different groups within, or different officers in the council? Because obviously we are putting a lot of money into some of these things, and they all seem to cross over. Just my general opinion on that one. But communications and press and public relations and development and communications all seem to mean the same, really.
I think they are discrete cost centres, but I would probably go to the finance director to answer that.
Yes, what are described as section codes here are basically staffing budgets, and they're separate teams, both reporting into my colleague Angela Woodhouse. Communications is marketing communications, and policy and information is headed by Anna Collier and includes Carly, who you can see on screen, and deals with policy, monitoring PIs, and a whole range of stuff in that area. So they are separate teams.
I can't see any more indications. No. So we do have a proposal that we accept the current KPIs and include one that has a particular focus on the market. Should we move to the vote? Those in favour? Those for? And those against? No, that's unanimous. Thank you. And then recommendations that we note the remainder of the report. Is that agreed? Agreed? Yeah. Yeah. And then that's everything. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Well done, Stan the man.